Hello and welcome to the Lower League Looks League One podcast. Too many L's in that first sentence. I am Seb and I'm joined as usual by Jamie. Jamie, happy Monday. How are we doing?
Hello, I'm all right. Very busy day, but nice way to finish it off on the podcast.
So yeah, it's been an interesting weekend across the various leagues. This is going to be all about League One. Lots of different scores, lots of different talking points. But firstly, were you affected by the snow at all at the back end of last week?
Yeah, well, I was meant to be in Sheffield for a non-league game, Hallam FC against Lincoln United. I was meant to be working on that, and then we got to Friday morning, and it was called off because the pitch was you couldn't see the pitch because of all the snow. But we had a I guess a silver lining. I went to the Donny game instead, and we won the first win I've seen this season for us. So that was sort of the silver lining to that cloud. But you went to Barnsley, was it, Seb?
Yes, I was at the Barnsley game on Saturday. I'm sure we'll come to it a little bit later on, but that was a great result for us at home, coming back to win. Yeah, like I said, we'll dive into that Barnsley game a little bit later on. We'll just sort of give a little bit of overview of what we'll chat about. We'll start with controversy regarding the handball rule, more so, and Stevenage's decision in that match. Then we'll look at the top teams dropping points. Only two teams within the top 9 of League One only managed a win at the weekend. Then we'll take a short break and we'll move on to chatting about favourites for the vacant position at Port Vale. And then we'll chat all things the other games, including Reading and Lincoln. We'll move on to Stevenage, Jamie, and there was what you could say a controversial handball in this one. Steve Evans says it was disgraceful decision, and he's sort of adamant of the fact that there might be an agenda against his side. Firstly, have you seen it, and what do you make to the decision?
Yeah, well, I'm not often one to agree with Steve Evans, but this weekend was the rare occasion where I saw the video and went, you know what, Steve Evans is right about officials because I don't think that's a handball. I mean, the angle that there was the Stevenage Twitter account put out a video of it. It looks like it hits his shoulder at best, if it's his shoulder, or I don't think it's his head. I do think it's hit his shoulder. But I'm sure the handball, isn't it? Is sleeve down, isn't it? So, bit of a dodgy one. It's 98th minute as well. Put a bit of kick in the teeth for them. Steve Evans is. I'm not sure about the agenda. I know there was a couple of decisions in midweek he wasn't happy about. He said they should have had a couple of penalties against Reading, and then he's obviously. I agree with him on this one that they should. That penalty shouldn't have been given. But it's one of those. I mean, everyone gets bad luck from officials, from injuries, from whatever, and it's how you carry on after it more than anything else.
Yeah, it was Scott Tallis, the referee, who he thought that there was a handball from Stevenage left back Dan Butler. He tried to sort of block across into the box on the Port Vale right hand side, and at that late stage in the game, like I said, 90+7, 90+8, sort of deep into additional time. Perhaps the pressure of the crowd, the ball into the box. Yeah, I myself have seen the video, and the more I look at it, the more I do think, how was that given as handball?
It's the
Even
lino that's give it, isn't it? You could see that
yeah,
because it didn't look like the ref was going to give it, and then the lino's flag was going up in the air, and then he
and
sort
it
of
was
immediately gives it. Yeah,
quite confident the way. So
yeah.
sometimes referees can be quite hesitant in terms of decision making, but the lino, on that the side closest to where the ball was, just a couple of yards away, seemed to be pretty adamant with the force that he waved his flag for the foul. But yeah, the referee seemed to be sort of umming and ahhing a little bit,
Mm,
but it
yeah.
was the linesman's flag that ultimately gave the penalty, and ultimately Stevenage dropped 3 points,
Mm.
which is a shame. Yeah, and I think you've summed it up perfectly there in that it's just generally, it's not often that we, as football fans, as League One fans, agree with Steve Evans. But clearly, they've had a decision go against him, which he's not happy about, and rightly so.
Yeah, Brock and clock right twice a day, isn't it? That's what they say, and I guess that's where we are with Steve Evans. But it's the agenda thing. I think that's the sort of dangerous aspect of it. As soon as you start going around and saying there's an agenda against my team, the league don't want us as high up as we are, I think that's just ridiculous. I don't know if he'll get any sort of punishment in terms of like a fine or anything. I know they're like handing those out to anyone that says some managers that say anything about officials. So I wouldn't be surprised the way he sort of banged on about that lino. But yeah, I agree that the decision was wrong, but the fact that when he thinks there's an agenda against his team, I think it's daft, really.
And also in that game, there were perhaps two penalties that weren't given. What are your thoughts on the penalties that the referee didn't award, as opposed to the one that he did right at the end?
Now, to peek behind the curtain, I've only seen very limited highlights of that one, so I've not seen the other penalties. I know there was a couple on midweek, wasn't there, when they lost to Reading, that they were very sort of unhappy about some of the decisions there, and Steve Evans thought they should have had a couple of penalties in that one.
So yeah. So I meant the Reading one. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So yeah, but I know there's definitely a couple in that. I mean, you can make the arguments that the penalties, and they're one of those. I think sometimes they're given, sometimes they're not. It's them sort of decisions, I think. But yeah, it's a messy situation really with the officiating, and just in as a whole in League One and League Two as well. I mean, I can't go on about it too much, but I got to get it in the Donny win and the officiating in that. Honestly, it's dreadful. I mean, you see some of the officiating in the lower leagues, even in the EFL, and it's unbelievable. Some of the officiating. And this handball in the Port Vale game, I think it's right up there with one of the weirder decisions of the weekend, let's say.
Yeah, and as for Stevenage, drawing late against Port Vale last Saturday, before that losing to Reading in midweek, should there be a slight concern for Stevenage fans?
I don't think so. I mean, especially with these decisions that have gone around, you can peg the blame on that, can't you? And you look, I don't know how much sort of people put stock in stuff like XG stats and stats that's that, but they're still to be playing okay, and it's only a couple of games, isn't it? It's a draw and a loss against two teams fighting for points to stay in the division. They're not easy games, even if they look like it on paper sometimes. So I don't think it's panic stations yet. I think there's a couple of teams maybe up that top end of the table that we'll talk about that maybe they should be panicking a little bit. But I don't think Stevenage are anywhere near panic station. I mean, it's maybe just a poor week rather than anything more.
Yeah. Stevenage were one of 5 sides in the top 9 to drop points. Only 2 wins, and they were Portsmouth and Barnsley. We'll start with Portsmouth, who currently sit at the top of the league table. They beat Carlisle 1-0, Paddy Lane with the goal. Portsmouth now unbeaten in 5, and with a couple of injuries not going their way. Do you think that's a sign of real momentum and real sort of unity within Portsmouth?
I think it's fantastic what they're doing. I mean, I know it's only 1-0, but a clean sheet and a win, and with those injuries, like you said, it was 3 players, isn't it? They've been ruled out for the season, including the lad they brought in January, McIntyre. Got sent off in his first game, and that got rescinded. But he's done his ACL, I think. It might be his ankle actually. But he's out for the season. And they're doing so well to sort of keep going. I mean, we all know they've got a great team. You mentioned Paddy Lane; he's got 3 goals in 2 games. They've got a great squad, and people like Owen Moxon sort of signing people like that. It really shows the depth they've got. 13 points out of their last 15. After that, quite a poor run, and I know everyone was seem to be writing them off that that's it. The league's gone. They're going to barrel down the table, but they're still there. They're still top. They have a couple of games in hand, don't they? Bolton and Derby, but they're 6 points clear of Derby. So it's a good situation that Portsmouth are in, and they're showing, like you said, they're showing a real character that they're managing to pull out these results while they are without bodies and without key people in their team. They're still managing to win games of football, and I think that's the sign of a winning team, isn't it? That they can win when the backs are against the wall.
It's definitely key, and that result means that Portsmouth are now 5 unbeaten. I beg your pardon, and that includes 4 wins, 13 points from a possible 15. Do you think Portsmouth will do it?
Oh, well, I pegged for Bolton at the start of the season, so I might have to stand by that a little bit longer. In Bolton have got 3 games in hand, just having a quick glance at the table. And if they win those 3 games and they go above Portsmouth, obviously you'd rather points on the board than games in hand and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think it's out of the question that they will win the league. I think there's a very good chance that they can. It's if the injuries catch them up. I think that'll be the only concern. If all these injuries that are stacking up, if come 2-3 months down the line, they've got maybe a couple more, or they've got a few tired legs, then that's when the concern will start. Because if your team's running out of steam in February, then something's gone wrong, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know if you know this or not, but they've only lost 4 games so far this season, which is remarkable, and they've won 59% of their games, won 19 out of 32. It's just remarkable, isn't it, for a side like Portsmouth that have been in the league for a long time. Could finally be the year that they get out, and they certainly are not. They're winning the games, which is what you need when you are pushing for promotion. They're not losing many, which is again what you need when you're pushing for promotion. And it's been a real solid, other than a couple of minor blips, it has been an overall real solid season for Portsmouth.
I mean, I can't quite. That's fantastic. Have you worked out that? I can't work out averages. That's took me aback. That
The win percentage.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But no, in seriousness, they're playing good football. They're winning games is the most important thing, and they're winning them often and frequently, and that's the key for them. If they can stay in that mix with the game in hand, I mean, you're not guaranteed to win them, are they? Bolton and Derby, and they've got a bit of a buffer that those games in hand, they can still be top after them, which is the key. And yeah, they're having a great season. There's no 2 ways about it. There's lots of naysayers, I guess, and I know maybe we were among them in January, but you look now and they're flying. And with the injuries, it's fantastic what they're doing, really, and how consistently well they're playing.
So as we move from Portsmouth to the only other side in the top 9 that they managed to grab 3 points at the weekend, and that was, of course, my beloved Barnsley. Late comeback. They went 1-0 down within 10 minutes against Leyton Orient, but 2 late goals through Adam Phillips on 88 minutes and 90 plus 5 minutes gave us a big win. So it was a great comeback win, to be fair. At times, it just didn't look great. We were creating chances, loads of chances in that first half, but we found ourselves 1-0 down. And the second half, although we scored 2 goals, we actually looked not the worst side, but we didn't look the better side as we did in the first half. So, overall, we were obviously very, very happy with the 3 points. But I don't know about you, Jamie, but I think it's a sign of a good team when you don't play well, but you still come out of the game with 3 points.
Yeah, that's the key. Like I guess we said a little bit with Portsmouth, the fact that they're winning without being at their best and having everyone available, and Barnsley are winning without playing their best football, which is, like you've said, that is the sign of a winning team, that they can pull a result out of the bag. And especially, I mean, the draw against Bolton wasn't a bad result, but that loss against Exeter not too long ago at home as well, I mean, that was a really poor result, and they've managed to bounce back from that, and they're back on track now. And yeah, to come back so late on, I mean, it's fantastic stuff, really. I've nothing too much to add from your gloating there.
What can I say? I've got a fun fact about Barnes as well. So, equalised in the 88th minute. It's the latest ever equaliser in a game that Barnes have gone on to win.
Fantastic.
So it was fantastic. And around Oakwell on Saturday, it felt special in a little way, which sounds really weird because Barnsley are not the top 2 and they've sort of been around the top 6 for long spells of this season. But it felt like something was building. This is the start of sort of a good momentum, a good run to possibly push for that top 2 if not, then certainly sort of push towards the higher end of the playoff places. But there was definitely something building both from the crowd and from the players. Both it works hand in hand. That's what they say. Not just at Opel, at any ground. The fans help the players help the fans. They both need each other to spur it on, and that you definitely felt that on Saturday. So a victory against Leyton Orient, who themselves are in good form. That they're just about in the top 9. In fact, Richard Wellens came into this having won the Manager of the Month award for January, and they were the side in the best form, 8 unbeaten ahead of the Barnsley match. So no mean feat to sort of win a side like that. We'll come on to them a little bit later on, but we've done the 2 sides that managed to claim victory at the weekend. We'll move on to the sides that managed to share the spoils, if you like. We've already covered Stevenage. We move on to cover Derby and an equaliser against Shrewsbury.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I think a 97th minute equaliser in that one, wasn't it? That's one of those where you look at it and you go, you come out. That's the sort of game you'll come out the ground and you'll probably be happy because you've got a late equaliser. But you look at it on the face of it, they've got a draw against Shrewsbury, which is not a good result for a team like Derby pushing at the right end of the table. I guess the silver lining is Max Bird, his 3rd goal involvement in 3 games. He's in fantastic form and a really, really fantastic player. They've got a good manager in Paul Warne. They've got a great squad. They've brought in some real quality during January, like Corey Blackett-Taylor, and they've got all the tools to keep up with Portsmouth and Bolton and Barnsley and stay in that mix for the automatics. And yeah, a point's not the best result, but it's not the worst either.
Is the point better for Paul Hurst and his Shrewsbury side, or is it better for Paul Warne and his Derby side?
I mean, you're probably going to look at Shrewsbury, aren't you? Because a draw against the top 2, a team in the 2nd place. I mean, that's a fantastic result for a team like Shrewsbury. We're struggling at the wrong end of the table, and it's a real congested bottom half of the table. And they're the sort of points come the end of the season. They're the valuable ones, aren't they? You pick up unexpectedly against teams a lot higher than you in the table. So it's a good point for Shrewsbury.
Yeah, Derby, as you said, still in the automatic places as things stand. We move on to Bolton, and their game was also 1-1, this time against Northampton. But a big talking point in this one was the red card within the first 30 minutes for George Thomason. What's your sort of makings of the decision to send Thomason off so early on in the game?
I think it's one of them. I don't think it should matter how far a game is into it. If something's a red card, it's a red card, or that sort of situation. But I think the real talking point for Bolton is that they've managed to rescue a point from that sort of situation where they're playing a game with 10 men for so long, and they've managed to get a point out of it, which is a good result on sort of reflection from it. It's 3 draws in a row for Bolton actually but it's against Blackburn, Barnsley, and then this one where they fought through that the red card in the first half. So it's one of those, maybe on paper it looks a poor result and a poor point against a team like Northampton, who are a lot lower in the table than Bolton, but in the context of the red card, like you said, in the first half an hour, then it's probably not a bad point for them.
No, I'm not quite sure what to think about Bolton. For me, I don't quite see them. I know they brought in Aaron Collins, and we spoke about that last week in terms of probably one of the signings in terms of January windows. I just don't see. I don't think they've got the quality to perhaps push for the top 2 in the league. I think they're going to have to be happy with a playoff spot, which is where they currently sit. They are 3rd, just 1 point off the 2nd place, but I can't really see them pushing. I know we spoke about the games in hand, but you'd rather have your points on board. I just can't see them pushing for the top 2. What do you think?
You'd always rather. Maybe I'm just more like more trusting in that Bolton team. I think they've got fantastic team, but everyone in that top section of the table have got great squads, and the squad, I guess, is the key aspect, that they've got depth. I think I understand where you're coming from. I think you'd always rather points on the board, like you've said, but games in hand, they're not the worst thing in the world. I guess sort of as football fans, you add 3 points on every time, don't you? But maybe you might not go that way. But even still, I don't think Bolton are in a bad situation at all. In third in the tables, and within touching distance of the automatics isn't awful. If they can sort of start picking up more victories after these sort of string of draws, because you need to be beating the teams around you, aren't you? Beat the draws to Barnsley and Blackpool, a couple of those teams in the top 9 that we're sort of focusing on. You need to be beating those teams if you want to be in the automatic spots, and if they can start doing that more, then I guess that's the step forward that they need to take.
Yeah, so and I guess only time will tell. Interesting as well, the Bolton have said that they're going to try appeal that Thomason red card. And also, manager Ian Everett was sent off as well. So I think they're going to try and appeal both of them. So it'll be interesting the outcome of that one. We'll move on to, we've already covered Stevenage and their draw against Port Vale. We'll move on to another side that drew, and that was Oxford. Another 1-1. Seems to be the lucky score at the weekend within League One. And it was, to be fair, between the two sides just below the playoff spots in Oxford and Blackpool. Two decent sides going head to head. What sort of caught your eye from this game, Jamie?
I feel like this one was a big game for Blackpool. Of course, being at home, they've got a very good record at home, and they're the ones that have sort of got a bit of catching up to do. They're currently on 47 points, Oxford on 52, with Stevenage in that last playoff spot being on 53. So Oxford only 1 point off the playoffs, whereas Blackpool, are 6 points off. So a win in this one is sort of closing that gap, but obviously it wasn't to be. They're 3 league games without a win, which has sort of followed a really good run. And now we'll talk about that when we get to Peterborough, won't we? It's how a team's sort of come on to really bad form after such a fantastic run.
Do you think 3 draws in a row is a concern?
I don't think it should be panic stations, because they've been playing decent teams with Bolton and Stevenage and then Oxford. They're teams up there, so I don't think it's panic stations at all. Oxford, I think they're a team that sort of confused me more than anything, in that they've sort of dropped off since Liam Manning left, and Des Buckingham came in with all the furore that he was going to be fantastic, and it's not quite come yet. I think it probably will in the next season or two. But yeah, it was an interesting one. It's their 3rd draw in a row, Oxford actually, and they've not won in 5. They've only got 1 win in 8 games. So it's 2 teams, both on a bad run of sorts. Oxford stretching back a little bit longer, and I think Oxford will be the main worry rather than Blackpool. I think they were 2nd when Liam Manning left for Bristol City, and they've dropped off considerably, I guess, with those teams above them being so consistent. So it's an interesting one. I think Blackpool aren't in a bad situation. I think Blackpool are fine. I really rate Blackpool as a side, and Oxford maybe are in a little bit of a rough patch.
This probably I don't know how to word this, but does this sort of show the lack of quality perhaps in the league? The fact that we are seeing Oxford and Blackpool just outside the playoffs, but yeah, actually neither of them have had that good form in the past 3 to 5 games. That although they've not sort of won in the past few games, as you sort of just reeled off there, but does it sort of show the lack of quality in the league, that they can not win for a couple of games but still be sort of amongst the top 8 pushing for the playoff spots?
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting point, actually. I mean, I sort of relate it to a Lincoln point when they was on their awful run. I think in the end it was 9 or 10 games without a win. They started that in 12th. They've now won a couple of games on the bounce, and they're up to 10th. I mean, they've not, that bad run didn't affect them league table wise, only a couple of spots. And I feel like a lot of people, they're just taking points off each other. Like the big sides in the league, they're all taking points off each other. the teams at the bottom of the table are all taking points off each other, and it's all sort of settling out. And I think it's a weird league more than. I don't think it's one that lacks quality. I think there's some great teams in this league. I think there's some great players, especially at the top end, naturally. And I think it's a good league and maybe more of an interesting one that there is so much competitiveness within the top sort of echelons of it. And I mean, you've got a team like Charlton down in fighting relegation, and Charlton they've got some fantastic players and now a fantastic coach as well. And I think there's quality in the league, even if maybe that quality is not performing as well as it could be doing in certain instances.
Yeah, maybe I sort of slightly worded the question wrong, but you get my point in that sort of.
No, it makes sense.
It is tight up there, but perhaps in recent years, perhaps in compared to recent years, this League One isn't as strong as to where it has been. You think of the sides that have come down from the Championship, Reading and Wigan, both in financial trouble, neither of which have really been you'd expect to push for the playoff spots, and they haven't. Blackpool are the other one that have come down from the Championship and are really challenging, but even then are finding themselves outside the playoff spots. And we'll come on to Peterborough then, one of two sides in the top nine to lose, and they did just lose, but narrowly. They lost 5-2 to Wickham, and that included 2 own goals. Disappointing display by Ferguson's side. Do you think it's just a one-off, or do you think that they're, after going on such good form, as you sort of hinted at earlier, that they could now sort of spiral down and end up in a pretty bad run?
Well, you asked me a couple of times if I'm worried about certain teams. We've got to the team I would be worried about, and that's Peterborough. I mean, it's 3 losses in a row, and they're all to bottom half teams in the division. But it follows that absolutely amazing 14-game unbeaten run in the league. I mean, it's remarkable that they've gone on such a good run, and it's all sort of spiraled out of control so quickly. And with 5-2, it's Wickham put 5 past Peterborough. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a Peterborough team that are a really good side. I mean, I don't know if maybe the January window has sort of caused some issues with Clark Harris or the mess there, and Mason Clark was going. Is he going? Is he not going? He's going. Well, he's gone, hasn't he? But he's back on loan for the second half of the season, and maybe there's just been a bit of upset there, and they're not quite where they want to be, sort of harmoniously in the dressing room. But it's a really worrying situation if you was a Peterborough fan. 3 losses in a row, like I said, to teams who aren't battling for you in the positions in the table. They're battling at the other end. And they've got Port Vale on Tuesday night, and I don't think that's an easy game. Port Vale obviously got that draw that we mentioned earlier against Stevenage, and not got a manager at the minute after Crosby was sacked. But you always see there's a bit of a like a rejuvenization under sort of interim coaches. Sometimes you sort of see that, and that maybe that is the case. And I really think that's another difficult one. And then they've got Blackpool after that, and maybe I'm higher on Blackpool than most maybe, but I think it's a difficult couple of games for them. And I think it should be worrying times, and they're not a million miles away from slipping out of the playoffs. I mean, they were fighting for automatics a few weeks ago, and they're slipping their way down.
Do you think the criticism of the goalkeeper was fair? So it's Nicholas Bilokapik. He was sort of at fault for the 4th and 5th game. Darren Ferguson defended him today after a torrent of abuse, saying it sort of had steamrolled out of hand. Do you think the criticism is fair? Only 21 years of age, on loan from Huddersfield. What do you make of sort of the comments from the fans towards him?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to single out one player. I know keepers tend to get a lot. If you concede 5 goals, you've got to look at the keeper, haven't you? I mean, it's just natural. If he's picking out the ball out of his net 5 times, then eyes are going to focus on him. And like you mentioned, there are a couple of errors leading to goals, and not a good performance from him by any stretch of the imagination. But it's not a a one-person show. A 5-2 loss like that, they're conceding 5 goals. It's not just on the goalkeeper. You've got to be looking at the team and the defence as a whole, and the sort of maybe a mentality in a way that they're struggling at the minute. But yeah, it was a poor performance from him. But you don't want to see a player getting abused because of a performance, regardless of how bad it was. But yeah, keepers tend to get a bit of stick, and I'm never a fan of goalkeepers really, just naturally. I'm always happy to put the foot in on a goalkeeper, but yeah, probably a little bit. You never want it to go too far, do you?
And just finally, before we take a very quick break, the last side in the top 9 was Leyton Orient, who fell to a defeat from Barnsley. Late defeat, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Richie Wellens was the January manager of the month, but that was actually their first defeat since the 23rd of December. So before Christmas, and they're up until the result, they were actually unbeaten in this new year. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back very soon to discuss the rest of the games in the division and also discuss who we think could be the new Port Vale manager. We'll see you in a moment. Hello and welcome back to the Lower League Lux League One podcast with myself, Seb.
All the L's.
By Jamie, exactly all the L's. I'll get it at one point. Too many L's for my liking. But we've gone through all the top 9 results. We're going to quickly pick up on a side that currently find themselves in the bottom 4, and they currently find themselves managerless, and that is Port Vale. They drew at home to Stevenage, which we discussed prior to the break. So all in all, probably a good solid point at home to a strong side. But as I mentioned, they are currently without a permanent manager. There's been a couple of names flown about. I know we quickly had a discussion about this last week, Jamie. There's obviously been a week to let things settle. It was quite raw when we discussed things in the review show last Monday. A week later, have you got any more idea as perhaps who could come in and be Port Vale's new man in charge?
Well, I'm interested to see what you think, but I know sort of my gut instinct was Gareth Ainsworth, wasn't it, last week? And I thought I've absolutely smashed this because he was the favourite in the bookies odds, wasn't he? That night and the morning after, I was all excited.
You were like
and maybe
reveling in yourself. Yes,
that's it. I've got it right straight away. But now he's disappeared from the running on the odds anyway. But I don't know how much stock people put into betting odds and such. But a couple of new favourites at time of recording is Matt Kennedy, who was dismissed by Lincoln in October, and Darren Moore, who obviously I know from Doncaster, but Sheffield Wednesday, and most recently Huddersfield, where he got sacked
as well. Yeah.
Very recently, really. It can't be more than a month ago after a really poor run of form there. I'm going to change my pick from last week. I think Smart, the head's on. I'm going to have to move from Gareth Ainsworth, and quietly, I was hoping maybe that it would be who I'm going to say. I'm really getting the tension going here. But I think
a big build up here, you know.
Shall we have a drum roll? I think it should be. I think Mark Kennedy. I think he's a really realistic option for Port Vale. I mean, obviously, I think he did a great job at Lincoln. I was always quite complimenting. Yeah, go on.
You've covered Lincoln for a little while, as well as sort of under Mark Kennedy's tenure. If he were to take over at Port Vale, what could sort of Vale fans expect from him? If Mark Kennedy were to be the new manager, let's say from tonight, from tomorrow, what can fans expect?
I think the key to a Mark Kennedy team, and I think it's not something he hides, is that the defence comes first, and this is why I think it would be the better option out of what's available, because when you're in the relegation zone, what do you need? You need a strong defence and a strong core to help you then attack from that, because you can't be attacking from no basis. It just doesn't work, especially with a team at the wrong end of the table. So I think Mark Kennedy is the perfect person for that he can sort of create a defensive grounding for the team, which is, I think that's sort of what they're missing in a way of a lot of teams down the wrong end of the table. You're missing sort of a defensive now. So they've conceded 45 goals this season in 29 games. A few teams worse than that, a bit lower down, but they're one of the worst defenses in the league, naturally being so low down. So I think Mark Kennedy will be the man to solve that problem. And once you start sewing up the defence, you start picking up points, even if it's a draw, and then you can start picking up the wins. And yeah, so that would be my explanation as to why I think Mark Kennedy is probably the best option out of those available. Gareth Haynes was probably the dream pick, wasn't he, last week, from maybe a Port Vale point of view. I was chatting to a Port Vale fan, on Twitter earlier on in the week, and she wanted John Eustace, which quite pie in the sky. Obviously, he's gone to
He's gone
Blackburn,
now,
hasn't he? So,
yeah.
But yeah, Port Vale, Blackburn, very different levels to the clubs, and I think Mark Kennedy is probably as good as it gets in terms of the available League One managers at the minute. But Seb, what do you? I've rambled on there about Mark Kennedy. Who do you think?
No. That's rightfully you covered Lincoln. I beg your pardon for a while, so you sort of know how Mark Kennedy runs. I think what you just said there about Mark Kennedy is sort of defence first will be music to Vale fans' ears. Currently sitting 21st place in the league, although they are on the same points as Charlton, just outside. My pick certainly wouldn't be Darren Moore, just based on the fact that Port Vale aren't in Yorkshire and he only manages Yorkshire clubs, except West Brom. He only manages Yorkshire clubs, so no, that's just a joke. I don't see Darren Moore going down to League One and especially Port Vale. Can I see Gareth Haynes there? Possibly, but I think it'd have to be a long-term project like he had at Wickham. But what Vale need now is someone in to get results and fast to sort of pull them away from the relegation fight. Yeah, probably would be Mark Kennedy. I probably have to agree with you. Yeah,
join the Mark Kennedy train.
Yeah, in based on the fact managers that are available right now, managers that sort of have League One experience. I know Ainsworth has managed in League One before, but it's more on the higher end of the table at his time with Wickham. Obviously, Andy Crosby, the man he would replace. I would go Matt Kennedy actually. Yeah, did pretty well at Lincoln. Probably harshly sacked when his time was up at the Central Bank as well. Probably deserves another chance. If he was given time to save Vale, if you like, because that's the priority until the end of the season. That's the priority for Vale, is to not get relegated. So if he can come in, save Port Vale from relegation, and then use next season as sort of a building season, that's certainly something that would be feasible for Mark Kennedy. But yeah, I'm going to be boring and agree with you. I think. Do you think it'll happen? And I know we both said Mark Kennedy, but do you think it'll happen?
I think it's one of them. I think this is one of those jobs where it's really up in the air. Because there's a lot of people floating around, even though there's not sort of loads of, maybe realistic being the right word, but people like Mark Bonner, people like Dino Marana, I can never say his name right, but Dino, I just tend to call him, from Burton, who got sacked.
Burton, who
just got sacked, left Burton, but he's one who, by all the sort of sounds and reporting, he wants a project, and coming into a team in February, that's not a project, that's a survival mission. So yeah, I'm struggling at the minute to look past Mark Kennedy. But last week I couldn't look past Gareth Ainsworth, so maybe next week I'll be looking.
So who's going to be next week then?
Well, could be anyone. Might be you next week, Sarah.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we'll have to see, because what Port Vale need, since they got rid of Mark Crosby, it's been one defeat and one draw, albeit a good draw against Stevenage, which we spoke about earlier on. They need 3 points. They need the game to get 3 points in I know the next couple of games are away at Peterborough, who themselves are in bad form, and then 2 other consecutive away games against Cheltenham and then Reading. That Reading game will be crucial, as will that Cheltenham one, to be fair, because both are sides sort of around them. Do you see them getting anything out of either of those games?
I think they're, to use the phrase, they're relegation 6-pointers, aren't they? Because they've got, after that Peterborough game, they've got Cheltenham, then Reading, and then Lincoln, but then they're back into it with Fleetwood soon there's a relegation fights. I
So
think
they're all sort of within a couple of weeks, aren't they? The fellow relegation struggling clubs, if you like. So some tough fixtures.
Yeah. On your sort of question of will they pick up points, I think they have to, just to sort of keep up with the pace, because they're level on points with safety with Charlton. Only a couple of points behind Reading and Shrewsbury, and there's a lot of teams who can get sucked into that sort of fight down the bottom. Even 14th with Wigan, they're only 6 points clear of the relegation zone. I mean, it's so compact down the bottom end of the table. So I think it's one of those where they have to pick up some points, even if it's just avoiding defeat, but they really can't afford to be losing those relegation battles. But no one can be affording to lose those sort of games.
So now we'll move on to the final part, and that is, of course, covering the other games, which we didn't mention prior to the break. The 2 games are Reading and Charlton, but we'll start with Lincoln versus Fleetwood. Lincoln coming from behind to claim a win, and a first home win for Michael Scabal, and in fact, the first home win since November. How impressive is this result for Lincoln, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good result, this, because they're on a good run. I mean, now it's 5 games unbeaten. They had 3 draws in January, and then a win against Burton last week, and now this one against Fleetwood. And they're going in the right direction after a really terrible run over Christmas. And the injuries that have been keeping them back are coming back into the squad now. I mean, they've picked up a couple more injuries that have sort of unbalanced the situation. But Ben House back his first start and he got a goal. He wasn't meant to be starting. Freddie Draper was meant to be starting because they're managing his minutes, but Draper picked up an ankle injury in the warm-up, so pulled out, and Ben House came in and scored. There was a red card, I think it's worth mentioning, just before half-time, and lots of controversy over that one. From a Fleetwood perspective, it seems to be that there was a mistaken identity, and it was a second yellow. And by the sounds of, I mean, I wasn't at this game. Like I said, I was at the Doncaster game, but from what I've heard, that maybe he did book the wrong person because it was a bit of a melee. Everyone was having a bit of a scrap, and Stockley was there, and everyone was having a go on. And he books one of the Fleetwood players, and then it seems so. Then he walks away, the referee, and then the Lincoln players remind him, "You've already booked him," and then he has to get the red card out. So maybe it is a situation that maybe he did book the wrong person. But unfortunately, Fleetwood maybe, but Lincoln sort of came back from that. They're 1-0 down at the time, and they scored a couple of goals in the second half to win. Like I said, it's 5 games unbeaten, and it's their first back-to-back wins since October, when Tom Shaw was the interim head coach, and they beat Fleetwood and Charlton back-to-back. And they've got Charlton on Tuesday night, so can they make it 3 out of 3? I think that'd be an interesting one to see. But they're into the top 10 with that win, so it's looking in the right direction for Lincoln.
You spoke there in terms of for Lincoln looking pretty positive, as you said. Now into the top 10 of the league. For Fleetwood, prior to the game at the weekend, they beat Port Vale, they beat Bristol Rovers, and obviously fell to defeat to Lincoln. Do you think the positivity was starting to come back to Fleetwood fans? I know it was sort of short-lived with just 2 back-to-back victories, but Charlie Adam finally winning and getting 2 victories in a row. Do you think that sort of I can't think of the right phrase really. Do you think that hope was short-lived?
I think Lincoln's a difficult place to go. I think even teams at the top of the division say that. Derby, they got a point at there in our stadium in January, and Paul Warren said this is a really difficult place to go. A point's a good result. So I don't think Fleetwood look at games like Lincoln away and go, they're the games we need to be picking up points from. But they've got Reading on Tuesday night, and that is a game they need to be picking up points from. And I know we'll talk about Reading in a minute, but another team down at that end of the table, and they've got Port Vale in a couple of weeks, like we mentioned. So they're the sort of games that they need to be picking up points from to pull themselves out of the wrong end and in that relegation zone. But I'd be staggered if Fleetwood stay up, and maybe that'll be clipped back at me in May if they do stay up. But I'll be absolutely shocked if they stay up.
Right, well that'll be the clip for the socials come the end of the season. But you heard it here first. I don't blame you, to be fair. I was thinking it, but I just wasn't saying it. But you went there, Jamie.
You got to go for it. You got to go for it, Seb. You got to go for it.
You went there, so
I just think to back that up. There's so many teams in that relegation scrap, and you look at the teams that are in it. You're looking at Reading, you're looking at Charlton, you're even looking at Port Vale, and they're the teams that they've got good teams, they've got good squads, and then you look at Fleetwood next to them, and you go, they've no chance of competing and beating teams like that in a fight to stay up. And I sort of look at it like that. Charlie Adams surprised me a little bit with those couple of wins, but an inexperienced manager in such a compact and sort of overpopulated relegation fight, I don't think it's a recipe for victory.
No, certainly not. And then the final game that we'll cover between two sides in the bottom section of the table, and that's regarding Reading and Charlton. Finished 2-0 to Reading in Nathan Jones's first game, and this is worrying signs for Charlton. 16 games without victory. It's concerning, isn't it, for Charlton?
Yeah, really, really messy. And Nathan Jones, it was his first game, wasn't it? And it's difficult that he's going to come in and hit the ground running straight away, but you've not got time, really. That's the problem with coming into a team in February, that you've not got time to be turning things around on the training ground before you go out there on the pitch, because you've got teams like Reading who have got Ruben Sellers, and they've had him all season, that they're beginning to turn a corner. They've back-to-back wins this was, and they're unbeaten in 5 games, and there's been some tough fixtures in that. They've won away at Stevenage, they beat Derby at home, they drew to Oxford, they even drew to Leyton Orient. They're 4 teams that we mentioned, they're all in the top 9 that we mentioned earlier, and they've picked up points against all of them. And they're the ones that are showing a sign of life. And a player like Femi Aziz, who've got a brace in this one, that's what you need. A player like that who can pull you out of a situation with his individual quality. They're not out of the woods. There's a few teams below them that have got games in hand, like we mentioned with Charlton. But it's a difficult situation for Charlton if they have been sucked into that relegation fight seriously now, and they are. Before maybe a month ago, we were saying, it's a fight for them to stay in touch with the playoffs, but now it's a fight for them to stay in the league, and it's not an easy situation for Nathan Jones. He's sort of come into a lion's den, hasn't he, in a way? It's things need to turn around quickly, and they've got Lincoln on Tuesday night, like we mentioned. That's not an easy game, but they need to turn it around and quick.
One thing for Charlton, you mentioned sort of that their position. They're only out of the relegation zone on goal difference, joint points with Port Vale that we covered earlier. And it's also been rumoured in the past week that their captain, George Dobson, could be on his way out. I can't remember quite, but it was the team abroad. Obviously, the English window has closed, but it's rumoured to be for a move abroad. What do you make to that? Charlton losing Charlton losing their captain. Too many C's now.
That's a tongue.
Charlton losing their captain when they probably need him most. What do you make to this?
That's a if it happens, that's a huge loss, isn't it? There's no other way of putting it. You're losing a leadership, you're losing a captain, you're losing a good player as well. So that'll be a sort of a punch to the gut, really, if that does happen. I did want to mention very quickly just the Charlton fixtures. I know we mentioned that Lincoln game, but we talk about them needing to pick up a win. After Lincoln, they travel to Bolton, then they're at home to Portsmouth, and then they travel to Derby. I mean, if you're looking at a stretch where you need to pick up a win and you're playing the top three back to back, it's not where you want to be when you're fighting for points and you need to get points on the board. So I think it's dangerous, really, really dangerous for Charlton, and they can easily drop into that relegation zone. And once you're in it, it's a lot harder to get out of it than it is to stay above it.
Yeah, he just pick up on what I mentioned. Captain George Dobson was looking to move to Ferrer
Very Rocher.
Which is in Hungary. So looking for a
Right,
move
okay.
abroad. Whether it happens sort of in the next couple of weeks or whether it happens in the summer, I think we'll see very soon. But if Charlton were to lose him now, it would be a big miss. This week we've got two rounds of fixtures. Obviously one midweek on Tuesday and one as usual on Saturday. Quickly, Jamie, what's your standout fixture for Tuesday?
My standout fixture we talked about Charlton Lincoln. I think that's a very interesting game. Two teams on the opposite ends of the form table. Lincoln on the uptick, Charlton on the way down, and Charlton need a win. They're at home as well. Nathan Jones' first home game in charge, so I think that's got all the ingredients for a good night under the lights at the Valley. But what about you, Seb? Don't say Barnsley.
I'll they're away at Shrewsbury, but I'm going to go with again two sides at the bottom, Fleetwood and Reading.
Yeah.
Reading have sort of dragged for the moment dragged themselves out of the relegation places, but Fleetwood, after two back-to-back victories, losing again at the weekend, so that'll certainly be an interesting one. Just a reminder as well, there is the weekend preview show hosted by Sam and Chris. That should be out on Friday. This has been the Monday review show. So, Jamie, thank you as ever for joining.
Thank you, Seb.
We'll be back next Monday, usual time, usual place. So stay tuned. But until then, we'll see you soon and goodbye.